We are AyinBase 16, believe it or not. Three lines from the top of the page, the Ayin begins legubay atzmo. So this was quite a revelation. When the Rebbe speaks in terms of the name, and he identifies two levels of the relationship between the name and the one named for. The name as it applies to the person himself, and his name as it applies to his property. As we discussed yesterday, that there is a real relationship there also. Yet, the name as it applies to himself cannot be divested, cannot be removed, whereas a name as applies to his property, the name, as you said, this is his oil, there it is possible to divest of it, and it's possible to sell the property, and it's no longer, his name is no longer attached to that property. Therefore, we see that the hispashtus of his name, the way the name is hispashed on something external, something that he owns, and we discussed the ownership is a real thing. Nevertheless, that hispashtus is not comparable to the way the name is applied to himself, which is also a hispashtus of the name. Now we continue on in the third line from the top. V'hu gamkin ha'hefresh. This, in fact, that we have identified, the difference between the name applying to himself, applying to his property, is a similar difference between etzem Hashem likriyas Hashem. Between the principle etzem Hashem, the fact that a person has a name, which is etzem Hashem, and then there is the secondary level, where a person is kriyas Hashem, is referred to, is called by his name. And the name that he is called by his name, just as we discussed yesterday on the property, this is nothing new. We say that ownership is a very real thing. Ownership is via the name. And the similar Indian is atzmo Hashem likriyas Hashem. So the Rebbe explained, Etzem Hashem hu, that the very essence of the Shem, meaning the fact that a person has a name, b'bchinas shaychus v'chibur elov, has the quality of a shaychus, of relationship with chibur and binding to him. It is bound with him. And that second level, where he is called by his name, Ein zeh b'bchinas chabros alov kol kach. It has not the quality of being his chabros, of being bound with him, kol kach, that much. In other words, there is a hischabus, there is a binding there. Even the aspect of that he is being called by his name is also bound with him, but it's not to that extent as the fact that he carries a name. The fact that he carries a name is an essential aspect in the person, as we discussed. And it is actually a direct allusion to the status of the person, the atzmo of the person. That's when he carries a name, as we discussed yesterday. But then, when he's called by the name, there is also a connection to him. But Ayin is chabas kol kach. When a person is called by his name, you're not calling his name, you're calling him. And he's the one who responds to the name. As a matter of fact, it says in Chassidus that a person is in faint. So one way of waking him from a faint is by calling his name. Which means that the name actually touches him at that deep, essential level. It's not just a reference. It actually touches him. Nevertheless, the fact that he is carrying a name represents him. The fact that he can be called by his name represents the fact that he has a name. In other words, it's a step down. Okay. Hagam, although the etzem Hashem, although that even the top level, the very presence of the Shem, of the name, Hugam kein rak Shem, is also only a name, loy Baal Hashem. It is not the Baal Hashem, it's not the person who is called by the name, it is only a name. And as we explained, this is the important thing to remember. The fact that he has a name is already a revelation of what kind of entity this is. Only an atzmo has a name. The etzem Hashem is not the Baal Hashem, which means the etzem Hashem, even though this is the etzem Hashem, but this is only the oil of the Baal Hashem, the broader presence of this Baal Hashem. This is what the name is. The name is identifying the etzem, the atzmo of the presence of the person, not the presence of the person as he's unto himself. So it's not the Baal Hashem. Mekomo koim yet still harei hu bibchinas shaychus elov. Yet the etzem Hashem carries an element of shaychus elov, of relating to him. Yoisim mikriyas Hashem shu legabe hazulas, more than the calling of the name level. Shu legabe hazulas, which is only legabe hazulas towards someone else. Again, we have to just to reiterate the principles. We have to reflect on the truth of a name, the fundamental reality of a name. Like we spoke about ownership of property, it's not a convention. Naming a person, the fact that a person has a name is not a convention, it's not for convenience purposes. It's a reality. It's a statement that this person has a real presence in the world. That's what the name represents, which means represents the reality of his presence. Then there is the union from Kriyas Hashem legubay hazulas. Now, a person's presence in the world, is it merely the fact? Let me just step down a little bit and look at it from a secular perspective. In the secular, me'ebet hakmeni, in the the identity of an object. So what is the definition of a piece of matter, of something present? Anybody know?
The definition of what?
Of matter.
Matter.
You can measure it.
It occupies space. And the infinite theory, occupy space, means that nothing else can occupy the same space. It displaces space. In other words, its entire identity is based on the fact how it affects others. This is what gives it its sense of reality. This is what's called chitzonium. It's very clear, but it's far from the godly reality. This is why we said a human being has a name. The inside that he has a name, it means that his presence in the world is not based on the fact that he occupies a certain space and nobody can occupy the same space. There's a fundamental reality to his presence. And he has this name regardless of whether he needs to be called by the name or not. And how does he get this reality? This is because this is the Creator who gave it to him. When you are discounting the Creator, you say that things created themselves and grab their own position. That's all you have, is they have that grab position relative to others. But if you recognize that the Creator gave you a right of being, it's a completely different phenomenon. It's an essential reality. Therefore, a person having a name legubay atzmo to himself is also significant. Although he doesn't need to refer to himself by name, but having a name identifies the significance of his being in reality, not relative to others. To take this a step further, the fact that he has a name, therefore he has mitzvahs, he has obligations given to him by his Creator, not relative to others. This means that he has a name, his own name. Okay, Don't need to elaborate any further. But so this is the pshat, that the name legubay atzmo is connected to his reality much more than the fact that he is being called by his name. Even though being called by his name is also reality. Because the fact that he is known to others is also reality. In simple terms, in the Torah there are two sets of mitzvahs. There's mitzvahs ben odom lamokim, and mitzvahs ben odom lachaveirei. Mitzvahs ben odom lachaveirei represent the Ayin. This is the name of the person as he would be called by others. Ben odom lachaveirei, or mitzvahs ben odom lachaveirei, are applicable only when he is under others. Ben odom lamokim are applicable all the time. This is his real presence. All the time. The mitzvah in the Torah to learn Torah every moment that a person has the ability to learn. Is that for the purpose to know what to do and to know how to answer questions? No, just this is part of his this is part of his reality. His mind has to be occupied with the knowledge of Hashem. The name legubay atzmo represents this presence, which is a real reality, a real presence. It is still not himself. It's only the name. It's only his presence in the world that obligates him to certain responsibilities within the world. But it is culture related to his very essence. This is what he's saying. Whereas a name, when he's being called b'gabe hazulus, which is also a real thing. It's not just a reference. Because his presence among others is also a real presence. But it doesn't compare to his presence unto himself. And I want to add one more notch in this. Contrary to what the chitzenius of the world would say, that his obligation towards others is formed, is a result of the fact that he is amongst people. If he will not behave properly, so the community, the society will throw him out. That's not the real thing. His obligation towards others starts with his obligation towards himself. Because he is a real creation, because he is a real presence in the world, therefore he has different kind of obligation, and his obligation towards others. But that is a step further from his own presence. In other words, the mitzvahs b'nodam chaveirei are a derivative, a subset of b'nodam lamokim. This is why in the Aseret HaDibros, that this HaDibros became v'ta'anoicha Hashem Elokecha, and end up lo yishivtzach lo yisigni.
Do you say that nefesh hasichli, just human logic, would bring you to, let's say, decent civil laws? But here we're saying the opposite, that by having a name, by having relationship to your maker, thereby you have decent relationships with other people. Elsewhere you seem to say different, no?
Elsewhere to know
that nefesh hasichli and these other nations would anyway come to...
Yeah, but that's not the real thing.
Why? That's not ben adam v'chavero?
It is, but it's ben adam v'chavero based on a worldly level. This is not the reality of it.
Oh, so while it may just look very similar or the same, it's
Right,
not
it's
based
not the
on
same
a
thing at all.
It's not based on an inner.
That's why the Rambam says that Sheva Mitzvahs L'Neach, which includes principally only from Melod Lachveri,
Yeah.
they are mitzvahs only. In other words, a Melech is accepting mitzvahs, then he is Mechasid Yom Olam only if he recognizes these mitzvahs as a command from Meibashim to Moshe Rabbeinu to them for Har Sinai.
Without
If
that,
he understands, if
right.
he gets to it for his own Seichel HaYosher, it's not the same thing.
It might be setting up a just society, but it's not a mitzvah level.
It's not. That's right.
Okay.
The main name says that laws that make the people who are alive, there are laws that give life.
Mm-hmm.
This is two different things in the same mitzvah.
Yeah. Right. So it's important to reflect on these. It gives a completely different perspective on ourselves and our life and to understand the Bichlal the reality. So Kriyas Hashem legabe hazulas, Kriyas Hashem shehu legabe hazulas, the calling by His name, which is on legabe hazulas, which is also an important aspect. Because his relationship and his being present amongst the Zulas is also part of his shlichus in the world. But it doesn't compare to the primary state that he has a presence, a godly presence in the world. This is the shame. Okay. We continue on. Hadugma mizela mailo. All right. So let's just refresh. How do we get into this union of the shame of the name? To explain how it is that even his pashtus ha'oir, even though his pashtus ha'oir is what's called ha'ora de ha'ora, yet that too has a quality of what's called tzura atzmis. That also represents and the truth of the atzmo. And the name and the way to understand it is through the yifun of a name. As we discussed, the name and in oil is the same inyan. Because a name is given, and this is we have to constantly remind ourselves. A name is given because there is a reality to the person, not for convenience purposes. And in the name itself, there are two different levels. There's a name K'mei Shehu Legabe Atzmei, and the name K'mei Shehu Nikra B'Shmei. This is a Ha'ora de Ha'ora. When you refer to a person, I mean, we have, our street is full of it. Instead of calling a person by name, you call him a you. What is the proper way to refer to a person by his name?
Or hey rabbi.
Huh?
Hey rabbi.
what's the significance of being called by name or saying hey you? Hey you is similar to the definition of an object being present relative to another object. It's there only because you're in my way, in my world. The name identifies a true presence. So what is this reflected Lamaila? So Spheres, because the Spheres hein bechinas rosa dishmei. Spheres is the aspect of rosa dishmei. Rosa dishmei means the inner meaning of the name. Rosa means soid. Rosa dishmei. The inner of the name prior to being revealed. That's Rosa dishmei. O Kriyas Hashem. Thus, Kriyas Hashem, the calling of the name. Zeho bechinas his galus versus Sphira Batzilus. This is the hisgalus of the Esesphere. This is what's called Kriyas Hashem. And as we explained just in the Moshel, being called by the name is a real thing. It's also identifying a reality of the person. But it's on a secondary level than the name as it is within himself. It's important to understand that he has a name, not in order that you should be able to call him by name. He has a name because he has a name. Because he has a real presence, as we already discussed. So the Kriyas Hashem, this is the Hisgalus as a Spheres Ba'atzilus. This is when the Spheres come to be in Hisgalus at the level of Atzilus. What is the inference over here? Is Galus as Ba'atzilus. Why Ba'atzilus? What is with Ba'atzilus? This is to correlate it to the Moshel. When a person is called by name, it is also not just a reference. He is being called by name. It's a real person. Which means that this is something which is close and related to him. Not as close as the name to himself, but still it's identifying the presence of the person. This is Atzilus. Atzilus is the Gilui of Elokus, the Gilui of Kesef. But it is a Gilui that stays close by. That's called Atzilus, Eitzel. It's a Gilui that stays close by to the source from which it comes.
How's that transition there? We went from name to Atzilus. Atzilus is like the name being called?
Right. So we can go through this, and it will all be very, very neatly fit and technical. But I'd like that we should really pay attention to what we're saying, and then have a real sense of what's going on. Okay, that's a chutzpah. All right. So I just want to reiterate. Kriyas Hashem is a moshel for his galus as a spheris ba'atzilus. Just one notch. Atzilus is, when Atzilus and Bria are compared, Atzilus is identified with Chochmah, even though there's 10 spheres, but overall these are 10 spheres as they're contained in Chochmah. And Bria, this is in Bina. That the spheres are contained in Bina. Chochmah we already discussed many times. Chochmah is compared to sight. Sight is a physical rendition of Chochmah. And it's a correct rendition. One of the principal qualities of sight is that in sight, the knowledge of the seeing, the object that you see, is due to the object itself, not due to your process of this information. It stays connected to the source, even though it's only knowledge. But that knowledge stays connected to the source. This is Chochmah. And we continue the mitzvah. Okay, have a great day, Feichen Chanukah, good Shabbos. Hopefully we'll get together tonight.
The mincha at Kislev Yitzchak is 3:20. If anybody wants to join that. So there's no mincha night before Shabbos, as far as I know.
I'm going to be here before Liebens.
la la